Earth is the only place in the universe where we know for sure that there's life. But what about elsewhere in the solar system? I'm going to be looking at 5 of our neighboring worlds where we might find evidence of life, either past or present. And I'm going to give you these in reverse order from 5th to 1st. At number 5, Venus. Now, Venus and Earth are both rocky worlds. They're similar in size, and Venus comes closer to the Earth than any other planet. But in other ways, they're totally different. You wouldn't last for a minute. You wouldn't survive for a minute on Venus, even with a spacesuit, because the surface temperature is more than 460 Celsius. The atmospheric pressure is so great, it would be like standing 900 meters underwater on Earth. And to cap it off, your remains would be dissolved by acid because it rains sulfuric acid on Venus. So if it's such a terrible place, why do I have it on my short list for life? Well, in the past, Venus was probably a friendlier place. It would have been cooler. Its atmosphere wouldn't have been as thick. It may even have had oceans on the surface. So there's a possibility that in the past, life may have developed there. Well, we're certainly not going to find life on the surface of Venus today because something went horribly wrong. At some point, Venus gained this tremendous carbon dioxide atmosphere. And of course, we know from Earth that the more we pump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the greater the greenhouse effect. On Venus, this became a runaway greenhouse effect and the temperature soared. In fact, Venus is hotter than Mercury, even though Mercury is closer to the Sun. So we're almost certainly not going to find anything on the surface of Venus today. But imagine that life did develop there in the past. What about if it escaped? Where would it escape to? Perhaps into the atmosphere. Because there is a layer of Venus's atmosphere between about 50 and 60 kilometers above the surface, where conditions are quite mild, almost Earth-like in temperature. And we've found some very interesting substances in this layer. One of them is carbonyl sulfide, for example, which on Earth is produced by living organisms. It's also produced in volcanic eruptions as well. Also, in this layer, something is absorbing ultraviolet light. When you look at Venus in ultraviolet, you see dark bands. Something in that layer is causing that absorption, and we're not sure what it is. Back in 1963, Carl Sagan speculated that maybe the absorption was by colonies of microbes. It's one theory of many. But recently, and I'm doing this talk now in November 2020, so I'm talking a couple of months ago, so in September, a group of scientists announced that they had detected phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus. Now, on Earth, phosphine is a gas that is only produced by living organisms, by microbes. You can make it in the lab, but we don't know of any other natural process by which phosphine arises. Well, there's a debate going on now whether the phosphine detection was real or not, and if it is real, are there other explanations that we don't yet know about, geological or chemical? We don't know at the moment. We need more information, either from ground-based telescopes or preferably by a spacecraft that is sent to Venus specifically to examine the atmosphere and find out what it's made of and what's going on there. Moving on, number 4 on our list, Titan. Titan is the largest moon of Saturn. It's also the second largest moon in the solar system after Jupiter's Ganymede. It's also the only moon that has a substantial atmosphere. Its atmosphere is actually 1.5 times thicker than Earth's, and it's made mostly of nitrogen. But it also contains a cocktail of other gases, including many organic chemicals. By organic, I mean carbon-based molecules and gases. And they form a kind of an orange haze that prevents us from seeing the surface of Titan in ordinary light. Titan is also the only object, apart from Earth in the solar system, that has stable bodies of liquid on its surface. It has seas, it has lakes, it has rivers. But these don't contain water. These are seas and lakes and rivers of liquid methane and liquid ethane, the two lightest hydrocarbons. So we've got interesting organic chemistry going on in the atmosphere. We've got interesting stuff, organic stuff on the surface. Does this suggest that Titan might have life? There are actually some places on Earth that are a bit like Titan in some ways. One of them is in Trinidad, and it's called Pitch Lake. It's a lake, not of water, but of asphalt. You know what asphalt is? It's a tarry, gooey, messy stuff that's full of all kinds of organic chemicals that you might find, for example, also in petroleum. It's hardly the place you would find living things. And yet within this asphalt lake, there are little pockets of water, little bubbles, if you like, of water. And within these bubbles, these droplets, have been found ecosystems of microbes. They are, in fact, the smallest known ecosystems on Earth. Well, that's very interesting. But Titan isn't Earth, quite clearly. It's much, much colder. The surface temperature on Titan is minus 179 Celsius. So there's not going to be any liquid water on the surface of Titan, except sometimes when large meteorites or asteroids hit the surface, they may cause water from below the surface, and scientists do believe there's water under the surface of Titan, to come to the surface and mix with the hydrocarbons already there. And the heat from the impact could keep the water liquid for centuries or more. And so there's the possibility that life could develop there. We don't know for sure, obviously. But Titan is interesting anyway, even if it doesn't have life, because the conditions on Titan in many ways are like those on Earth billions of years ago, before there was life. So the same chemical processes that are happening on Titan today, some of them at least, may have been happening on the early Earth. So by studying more about Titan, we may be learning more, or we may learn more about the origins of life on Earth. So, to number 3 on our list. And here's an interesting one. You may not even have heard of this place, Encelus. It's another moon of Saturn. It's actually the 6th largest moon of Saturn. It's only 500 kilometers across. And it's covered in clean, white, fresh ice. It's the most reflective object in the solar system. But it's so small and so cold that surely it's dead in every respect. Geologically inactive, frozen through and through, of no interest whatsoever biologically, surely. But no, surprise, surprise. The Cassini orbiter, which orbited around Saturn between 2004 and 2017, I think, discovered, as it flew past Encelus, plumes, giant plumes of material welling up from fissures near the South Pole. There seems to be a hot spot at the South Pole, and these fissures, which are known as tiger stripes, are where these plumes well up into space, shooting out material at speeds of 2,000 kilometers an hour. And in these plumes, because what happened, of course, after Cassini made this discovery, the scientists redirected the Cassini probe to fly through the plumes and then get a view, closer view of the plumes, and also look at what chemicals were in there. They found water, ammonia, methane, various salts, and a mixture of organic chemicals. So here are the ingredients for life, the basic ingredients for life. There's apparently water below the surface of Enceladus. Now, you might be asking, well, how can a moon this small, this cold, have water? Well, it's the same reason that Titan probably has water, and also I'll be talking about another place also that surprisingly has water beneath its surface. The mechanism is tidal heating. The gravitational force of Saturn is twisting and stretching the body of Enceladus and producing internal heat. And that appears to be what is keeping this water liquid under the surface. So we've got water. We've got apparently organic chemicals, because that's what Cassini found in the plumes. And we have a source of energy as well. The three key ingredients for life as we know it. Well, of course, it's a long way away from saying Enceladus has life, but it's another potential place for us to look for it in the solar system. Number 2 on my list, it's another moon, it's Europa. Europa is one of the 4 large moons of Jupiter, the so-called Galilean moons, because Galileo was the first to see them in the early 1600s. And Europa is a fascinating place. It's been explored by the Galileo spacecraft, which orbited around Jupiter, I hope I get my dates right here, between 1995 and 2003. And it made the discovery, through various measurements, that Europa has an underground ocean. In fact, it appears that the icy crust of Europa is between about 10 and 20 kilometers thick, and beneath this, and going around the entire moon, is an ocean up to 100 kilometers deep. In fact, it appears that it contains about twice as much water as all the oceans on Earth. And also, there appears to be an exchange of material going on, a continual exchange of material between the surface and the ocean. It appears that slabs of ice from the surface slide down into the ocean, a bit like plate tectonics on Earth, bringing down organic material from the surface, because organic material arrives, for example, on comets and asteroids, taking that down into the ocean, and also water from the ocean wells up to the surface, because the surface of Europa is one of the youngest in the solar system. That, by young, I mean that it's constantly being remade. It's changing all the time because of stuff that's happening. The ocean welling up to the surface and freezing again on the surface. So we've got this exchange of material going on. Europa is a very, very promising place to look for life, because we've got water, we've got organic material, we've got change happening. Probably also there are hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean on Europa, and hydrothermal vents on Earth are the home for large communities of organisms, everything from microbes up to crabs and fish, worms, all kinds of things. And also one of the places that scientists suspect life may first have originated. So we'd love to go back to Europa and take a closer look. And that's going to happen, because in 2024, NASA is going to launch its Europa Clipper spacecraft, which will take about 6 years to arrive at Jupiter, will go into orbit around Jupiter and then make multiple passes of Europa as close as 25 kilometers, looking for more evidence of Europa's habitability. Not whether it actually has life, but whether it has all the conditions necessary. We come to number one on my list. And I was going to put this one a little bit further down the list, but in the end, I had to put it top. I think if somebody said, where would you put your money on any world in the solar system where you think we're most likely to find life, I'd have to go with this one. And of course, it's Mars. Mars, the red planet. I suppose Mars will always have a place in our imagination because of its link with intelligent Martians. And this goes back to the 1870s, 1880s, when some astronomers thought they could see through their telescopes waterways on Mars. And very soon, the idea developed from this that perhaps those waterways were artificial, that in fact they were canals that brought meltwater from the frozen poles, or melting around the poles, to the arid desert regions of the planet. And then, of course, it's a short step. If you have canals, you must have canal builders. Therefore, there's an advanced race of Martians trying to eke out a living on a dying world. Well, sadly, we don't believe in intelligent Martians anymore. But could Mars have had life in the past? And if it did, is there life still there today? Mars was once friendlier in the past than it is now. It was warmer, it was wetter. We know these things for sure. We know there were bodies of water on Mars, including a shallow ocean. There were rivers. It was warmer, the atmosphere was thicker. It was a much more clement place 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. So life may have developed there. And if it did develop there, does it survive there today? That's the question we still want to know. It's still an open question. We've been to Mars many times. Various spacecraft have been there, flown by it, gone into orbit, landed, roved around, and still the question needs to be answered. Does Mars have life? Did Mars have life? Well, there's not much chance that there's life right on the surface because it's very, very cold on Mars. Colder than Antarctica most of the time. Very little atmosphere, thin carbon dioxide atmosphere, and harsh radiation from the sun, and also some toxic chemicals, perchlorates in the surface soil. Makes it kind of unlikely that we're going to find anything living on the surface. But is there life underground? We know there's life deep underground in rocks on Earth. Is there life deep down on Mars? That's the question. There are some interesting observations. For example, methane has been found in the atmosphere of Mars. It's patchy, it occurs here and there, and it seems to vary on a seasonal basis, which is interesting, but it could have a geological explanation as well. Of course, we need to go and have a closer look, and that's going to happen because in February of 2021, NASA will launch its Perseverance rover, which will go to Mars, it will land, and it will trundle around, and it will drill samples, and it will leave these samples on the surface. And you might think, why does it do that? What's the point of that? Well, in the future, other spacecraft or another spacecraft will go there, will collect these samples that have been left around, and hopefully bring them back to Earth so we can analyze them in the laboratory, because that's the best way to do it. But there's also another rover going there. This is the European Rosalind Franklin rover, due for launch, I think, in 2024. And it is also a rover. It will move around and it will drill samples up to 2 meters deep. And it will analyze these samples in its onboard laboratory, looking for chemicals that are the signatures of life or possible building blocks of life. And that's going to be very exciting indeed. There are my 5 top picks for life in the solar system.